The first clue that something was profoundly wrong with Daniel Ugo wasn't his impossible wealth, but the way he made sure that everything around him was in white color. His clothes, cars, mansion, and even the uniform of his staff were white. And he never went to an office, nor did he own a business. Daniel, barely 30, owned the sprawling white mansion on the hill, yet he lived like a ghost. He had no friends, no visible family, and absolutely no evident past. The city of Lagos simply woke up one day 5 years ago and found him there, his bank account seemingly infinite. His enigma, however, took on a supernatural quality every Friday. The activity began early. By 7 a.m., the street outside the mansion gates was a carnival of expectation. People came from all corners of Lagos State: market women, struggling students, retired civil servants whose pensions had evaporated. They all queued for the Friday giving. At 9:30 a.m., Daniel would step onto the veranda. He was always dressed in crisp, immaculate white linen, looking less like a billionaire without any stress or stain on his name. He was also covered in beaded accessories. "Welcome, my friends," he would call out, his voice smooth as polished stone. "Come forward. Ask, and it shall be given." And it always was. A woman named Ngozi once requested funds to put her 3 children through university, a sum that could have bankrupted a small company. Daniel simply nodded, and the wire transfer was made before sunset. Another man, Chidi, asked for money to start a new, massive aquaculture farm. Granted. There were no forms to fill out, no contracts to sign, and no expectation of repayment. "Why don't you ever ask why, Uncle Chidi?" a young man named Emeka once pressed the farmer as they waited in line. Emeka, a blogger, was trying to find the angle, the hidden catch. Chidi adjusted his fila cap. "The sun shines, we accept the warmth. Daniel gives, we accept the blessing. The why is not for us, young man. It is only for him." But the sheer volume of it. "It's like he's trying to empty his vault before a deadline," Emeka insisted. "It's unnatural." "Maybe that's exactly what he is doing," a stern-faced security guard muttered under his breath, adjusting his uniform. For 5 years, no one had dared to question Daniel Ugo's source of income. The gifts were too intoxicating, the generosity too absolute. Yet one unshakable rule governed the mansion: no one was allowed near the northern wing on the 2nd floor. That wing housed a single, unmarked door. It was made of thick, dark mahogany and reinforced with steel, looking completely out of place in the airy, modern house. Daniel had no security guards posted there, but the air around it felt heavy, oppressive, as if the silence was its own guardian. One Friday, after the crowds had been satisfied and the gates closed, Emeka found his chance. He had slipped past the kitchen staff and waited near the central staircase. He watched as Daniel, visibly exhausted, began his retreat back into the house. "Mr. Daniel," Emeka called out, stepping into view. Daniel stopped, waiting to hear what Emeka had to say. "You've been generous to everyone here," Emeka continued, his voice shaking slightly. "But I don't want money. I want a story. What is the Friday giving? Why only Fridays? Why do you look so relieved when it's over?" Daniel descended 3 steps, his eyes piercing Emeka's. "The giving is a mandate, Emeka. An obligation." "An obligation to whom?" Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice until it was a harsh whisper. "Have you ever considered that the fortune may not entirely be mine? That I am merely a steward? And that the day of the week matters because the debt is collected on Saturday?" Emeka felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Debt? What kind of debt requires millions to be paid off every week? Daniel looked away, his gaze drifting up the stairs toward the ominous northern wing. The kind that requires a constant offering. And if the funds are insufficient, the payment is extracted elsewhere. He placed a hand on Emeka's shoulder, his grip surprisingly strong. "Leave now, young man. I have something else to attend to." Daniel turned and, with an air of profound resignation, began to ascend the stairs, not towards his luxurious master suite, but towards the dark, silent corridor leading to the locked door. The house grew instantly colder as he disappeared, leaving Emeka alone. Emeka felt the chill of the evening air on his face, but it was nothing compared to the icy terror that had gripped his heart. He walked away from Daniel Ugo's estate, his journalist's instinct battling with a primal urge to flee. The debt is collected on Saturday, the price of a failure to pay. Daniel's whispered words echoed in his mind, turning the benevolent Friday ritual into something sinister, something transactional. Emeka had a story, but he was missing the most crucial, terrifying piece. What was inside the mahogany door? Upstairs, Daniel Ugo stood at the entrance to the northern wing. The expensive white linen of his clothes seemed to absorb the light, leaving him a figure of profound shadow. The relief he'd shown earlier had evaporated, replaced by a grim, focused dread. He knew what lay beyond the heavy door, and he knew the gravity of the hour. He took a slow, deep breath, then raised his hand. Knock, knock, knock. The sound was shockingly loud in the silence of the large house, a metallic echo that seemed to vibrate in the very foundations of the building. With his left hand, Daniel grasped the ornate brass doorknob. It turned with a heavy, grinding sound, and he pushed the door inward. The atmosphere within was instantly suffocating, a thick, stagnant air heavy with the scent of dried herbs and metallic decay. This was no ordinary room. It was a sanctuary of the profane. The walls were draped entirely in deep crimson cloth, interwoven with patches of pitch-black velvet. The dim light came not from electricity, but from dozens of candles that flickered with unnerving steadiness, their flames throwing grotesque, dancing shadows. Spiritual objects lay scattered around, thick calabashes, some clearly stained with dark, congealed liquids and strange, polished skulls of animals hanging from the ceiling on sinewy threads. At the center of the room, dominating the space, lay an antique, velvet-lined coffin. Daniel walked slowly towards the coffin, his footsteps muffled by the ceremonial drapery on the floor. He knelt before it, and his shoulders slumped with the weight of his burden. "The hour is here," Daniel murmured, his voice now ragged, stripped of its public composure. He began to speak, the words falling into a rhythmic, ancient pattern, an incantation that felt older than the mansion itself. After reciting the incantations, he then followed by saying, "I have done my duty. The Friday contract has been honored," he recited, his head bowed. "I dispersed the resources given to me. The seekers came, and they asked for healing, for abundance, for their new ventures. And they received. With every blessing given, with every thank you whispered, their good fortune and success have been taken for my disposal. My storehouse is full. My offering is complete." He paused, a chilling pride in his voice. "Let my adherence to the terms be accepted. Let this transaction be ratified. As I perform the final act, let the covenant be renewed. Bless me not with peace, but with more and more of the money." With a final, profound sigh, Daniel pushed himself to his feet. He stepped over the edge and into the waiting coffin. The wood groaned under his weight. He lay down, his crisp white clothes stark against the dark lining, and reached up with both hands, slowly pulling the heavy lid closed over himself. Absolute darkness enveloped the room. The first glimmer of dawn did not penetrate the windowless sanctuary. When Daniel Ugo opened the coffin the next morning, the room was exactly as he had left it, save for one detail. Lying beside the coffin, close enough to touch, were two enormous jute sacks. They were bulging, overflowing with the unmistakable green and white currency of hundreds of thousands of dollars. The payment had been accepted. The debt had been serviced. Daniel Ugo had survived another week, but the real question was, how long until the covenant demanded more than money? The ritual was complete, the terrifying debt paid, and the weekly renewal granted. Daniel Ugo stood over the 2 bulging sacks of cash, the sheer volume of the freshly printed dollars a vulgar testament to the covenant he served. With a profound joy filled with greed, he dragged the heavy sacks out of the crimson-draped room and into his opulent, sun-drenched master suite. The air here was clean, the furnishings modern and bright, a deliberate counterpoint to the darkness he had just endured. He didn't count the money, he didn't need to. He knew its value and its purpose. It was the fuel for the whole week and also the coming Friday, as he must make sure to finish all on Friday, because more importantly, it was his license to live for the next 6 days. The transition was immediate and jarring. The figure who had just emerged from a coffin was instantly replaced by the quintessential young billionaire. Daniel shed his linen clothes and prepared for the only thing that followed the grim sanctity of Saturday morning, the pursuit of loud, immediate, and utterly distracting pleasure. By sunset, the massive gates of the Ugo estate swung open with an almost ceremonial flourish. The sight was enough to make anyone stop and stare. Daniel's S-Class Mercedes-Benz, black and gleaming, rolled out first. Leading the convoy was a black G-Wagon, filled with silent, stone-faced security operatives. Bringing up the rear, adding a dramatic, official flair, was a sturdy Hilux truck, its occupants armed and alert, occasionally flashing a blue and red light, a clear statement that this was a person of high importance. Daniel sat in the back of the Mercedes. He was dressed in an expensive shirt and jeans with a very expensive sneaker, a Rolex on his wrist, his face a mask of bored entitlement. His driver, Okafor, focused on the road, knowing better than to disturb the boss on a Saturday night. "We are heading to the vault, sir?" Okafor asked, his voice low. "Yes, Okafor." "The usual crowd," Daniel replied, not looking up from his phone. His voice held no enthusiasm, only resignation. When the convoy pulled up to the vault, the city's most exclusive nightclub, the velvet ropes parted instantly. Word spread like wildfire through the crowd. Daniel Ugo had arrived. He made his entrance like royalty, a conquering hero arriving to dispense favor. Inside, the music was a deafening, pulsating beat. Daniel immediately commandeered the most private VIP section, ordering bottles of the most obscenely expensive champagne. He snapped his fingers at the maitre d'. "Send for the usual, Kalechi. I want the ladies who understand the true meaning of the word celebration." Soon, his corner was swarming with beautiful, eager women, all vying for his attention. He didn't engage them in meaningful conversation. He didn't need to. The language he spoke in the club was the universal dialect of excess. As the music intensified, Daniel stood up, a bottle of champagne in one hand, and began his performance. He didn't merely dance. He sprayed crisp $100 bills into the air in thick arcs. The floor immediately transformed into a chaotic battlefield of desire. People, men and women, rich and poor, patrons and staff, fell to their knees, scrambling and pushing to grab the reigning fortune. Daniel laughed, a hollow, mirthless sound, watching the frenzy he had so effortlessly created. "Look at them, Kalechi," Daniel shouted over the music, gesturing wildly at the supplicants below. "They grovel for what I merely waste. This is the only truth in this world, the power of the means." Kalechi, the veteran club manager, just offered a practiced, deferential smile. "You are the king tonight, Mr. Ugo. The only king." As the first hint of Sunday morning touched the sky, Daniel left the club, 2 beautiful young women draped on his arms. The convoy whisked them back to the secluded mansion. The night blurred into a sensory overload of alcohol, music, and fleeting, transactional intimacy. When he woke up hours later, the sunlight streaming through his window, the dark shadow of the mahogany door was momentarily absent. He was surrounded by the luxuries that only vast, ill-gotten wealth could buy. He looked at the two girls who were already dressing. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a thick wad of fresh currency, more than most people earned in a year, and placed it on the bedside table. "Thank you for your company," Daniel stated, his tone flat, final. It was sufficient. As the women gathered their payment and quickly left, whispering excited thanks, Daniel lay back against the silk sheets. He was enjoying his life better than he could have ever imagined. He had money, power, and everything anyone could ever desire. Daniel Ugo lived a life suspended between two extremes, the dazzling, deafening excess of the weekend and the quiet, terrible reckoning of the covenant. On Monday morning, as his staff busied themselves cleaning up the remnants of his Saturday revelry, Daniel sat in his office, his mind calculating the week ahead. 5 years. 5 long years, and the terms had been clear: share the fortune on Friday, perform the ritual, and avoid the cardinal sin. The money itself was an easy price. The constant demand for public charity was exhausting, but manageable. "It's a simple system," he often mused to his reflection, the dark circles under his eyes the only evidence of his nightly torment. Fulfill the obligations and the wealth flows. He must never share his wealth with family. His family must never enjoy or benefit from his wealth. That is the line. He was so deeply entrenched in the routine that the thought of error felt impossible. He had insulated himself, cut every tie, and ensured his few remaining staff were meticulously organized, minimizing his direct interaction with the Friday crowd. He was fine. He was in control. Or so he believed. The next Friday arrived, bringing with it a crowd larger than any Daniel had seen before. The line stretched far down the road, a testament to the enduring, magnetic pull of his inexplicable generosity. Daniel was forced to remain on the veranda, greeting the most prominent supplicants, while his staff, led by his trusted assistant, Kemi, handled the distribution of smaller envelopes and packages to the bulk of the crowd. It was a whirlwind of hands reaching, voices pleading, and money changing hands. Kemi was a blur of efficiency, moving quickly from person to person. "Next. State your need clearly, please." Kemi urged a woman whose face was partially covered by a scarf and sunglasses, a common disguise among those seeking anonymity. The woman, petite and nervous, only whispered, "I need funds to cover a medical procedure for my son. Just enough to get him to the city hospital." Kemi, focused on speed, simply handed her a thick envelope containing several 100,000 naira. "May your son recover swiftly." Next. The transaction took less than 15 seconds. The woman, whose name was Busy, tucked the envelope away, her eyes never meeting Kemi's, and disappeared quickly into the stream of the crowd. Daniel, preoccupied with negotiating a grant for a community center, never saw her face. He didn't know that Busy was his younger sister. A sister he hadn't seen in over a decade, a sister who, out of pride and desperation, had come seeking help. She clearly did not know that her brother was still alive, as they had lost hope since they never heard from him for years. Evening descended, bringing with it the familiar, heavy weight of the ritual. Daniel locked his bedroom door and walked the lonely corridor to the northern wing. He was weary but satisfied. He had dispersed millions, maintained his public image, and prepared the offering. He performed the ritual precisely. 3 knocks, the left hand turning the knob, and the step into the crimson-draped room. The air was thick and silent, the candles flickering predictably. He walked toward the coffin, ready to recite the binding incantation. But before he could utter the first word, the silent air was shattered. From the shadows, 4 figures materialized. They were terrifyingly abnormal, tall, lean, and adorned only with strips of wild foliage woven around their midsections. Their skin was painted with strange, stark symbols, and their eyes glowed with an unnatural, cold intensity. Each of them held a long, polished ceremonial rod. Daniel froze, a gasp caught in his throat. These were not the usual specters of his fear. These were the spirits of the covenant, and they had never appeared before. "What is this?" Daniel cried out, his voice cracking with fear. "I fulfilled the terms. The contract was honored." One of the figures stepped forward, its voice a chilling, multi-layered rasp that seemed to come from all corners of the room at once. "Steward Ugo, the primary law was broken. The ledger is stained." Before Daniel could deny it, the figures raised their rods. They descended with terrifying force, striking him across his back and arms. The pain was immediate, sharp, and intense, far beyond a physical blow. Daniel stumbled backward, screaming in agony. "Stop! I don't know which law I have broken. Please, spare me," he pleaded, scrambling to cover his head. The blows intensified, a rhythmic, punishing shower. The four figures moved with chilling precision, driving him not toward the coffin, but toward the door. Daniel realized with a sickening jolt of fear that his week's protection was nullified. He was being violently expelled. Still wearing his pristine white linen, now soiled and torn, Daniel scrambled to his feet, abandoning the ritual, and burst out of the mahogany door, the terrifying sound of the ceremonial rods whistling behind him. He ran blindly down the quiet corridor, his desperate, terrified cries echoing in the grand, silent house where no help would ever come. The debt collector had come early. The metallic whistling of the ceremonial rods still echoed in Daniel Ugo's ears, a chilling, psychological torment. He ran, blindly, stumbling down the main staircase, the shock and pain overriding everything else. When he finally skidded to a stop in the main foyer, he leaned heavily against a marble pillar, gasping for air. He looked back toward the silent, innocuous staircase leading to the northern wing. Nothing was chasing him. The house was calm, the staff confined to their quarters, utterly unaware of the terror that had just unfolded. But Daniel knew the truth. The absence of the spirits didn't mean the punishment was over. It meant the countdown had begun. He was a mess. His immaculate white linen was ripped, stained with dirt from the floor, and small smears of blood from the wounds the rods had inflicted. Sweat poured down his face, mixing with tears of sheer, unadulterated fear. He was no longer the composed, powerful billionaire. He was a desperate man clinging to the edge of sanity. "I have to fix this. Now," he muttered, pushing himself upright. His mind, usually sharp and calculating, was racing. The four spirits had materialized for one reason only. He had broken the law. And in the shadowy world of the covenant, breaking the law meant one thing: total annihilation. He grabbed the nearest house phone and punched in a familiar number, his hand shaking so violently he almost dropped the receiver. "Okafor, get the car. Just the car, no escort. And meet me at the service entrance in 5 minutes." Daniel barked, his voice hoarse. Minutes later, a single black Mercedes-Benz glided out of the estate's service gate. Daniel sat hunched in the back. He gave Okafor an address deep in the forgotten outskirts of town, a place of thick bush and mud roads that even his GPS struggled to locate. "Sir, what is happening?" Okafor ventured, glancing into the rearview mirror at his bruised, terrified boss. Did someone get past the security?" "Worse, Okafor." "Much worse," Daniel whispered, running a hand over his face. "I need to see Baba Jide." When they finally arrived, the air was thick with the scent of wood smoke and dried roots. Baba Jide's compound was a chaotic maze of totems, rusty corrugated iron, and strange, growing things. The herbalist, A man whose eyes seemed to see straight through flesh and bone, emerged from his inner sanctum, his gaze immediately fixing on Daniel's distressed appearance. "Omo me," Babajide sighed, his voice ancient and resonant. "You come to me like a man who has signed a contract with a beast, and then fed it your own flesh. What madness is this? You know the penalty for error." Daniel rushed forward, dropping to his knees. "Baba, I swear, I followed every instruction. The money was dispersed. The ritual was next. But they came, Baba. They beat me and threw me out. What did I do wrong?" Babajide looked at Daniel with cold disapproval. He moved to a small, secluded area, lit candles, and began a rapid, complex consultation with his unseen powers. He chanted through cowrie shells, and finally his eyes glazed over, staring into the middle distance. When he spoke, his voice was no longer his own. "The oracle is displeased. The contract is damaged. You gave the fortune to your blood. Your sister's hand touched the money. The covenant demands isolation from family. You mixed the blessing with the source of your humanity. This is a poison to the agreement." Daniel stared, shaking his head furiously. "No, it's impossible. I don't know any of those people. My family, they don't know where I live. They think I'm dead or overseas. I haven't spoken to Bizi in years." "Ignorance is not protection, Daniel," Babajide stated, his eyes returning to normal, hard and unforgiving. "The deed is done. The spirits demand compensation. The glory you collected from all the poor souls cannot be used to service the debt if the terms are corrupted." The herbalist leaned closer, his eyes burning with urgency. "Listen to me, Daniel. You have committed an unforgivable offense. The penalty is the loss of your mind. You will become a wandering madman, stripped of your wealth and yourself. The spirits will return on the fourth day to collect this final payment." He pointed a bony finger at Daniel. "You have 3 days. You must locate the woman, your sister, and reclaim the entirety of the funds you gave her before she spends a single kobo. If that money gets spent, the contamination is permanent. Go now. Find your sister and recover the money, or your kingdom falls." The stark pronouncement from Babajide, 3 days to reclaim the money or run mad, had ripped the last vestige of composure from Daniel Ugo. He didn't hesitate. The thought of the ceremonial rods and the looming madness was a terror far greater than facing the past he had deliberately abandoned. "Okafor, the village. We are going to my family's home now. Drive as if the demons of the earth are chasing us," Daniel yelled, scrambling back into the luxury sedan. Okafor, galvanized by his boss's naked fear, put the pedal to the metal. The drive was long and agonizing, leading them away from the polished highways and onto the rutted, red earth roads of Daniel's childhood. It had been over 10 years since Daniel had set foot in his village. The names of the winding paths and landmarks were faded ghosts in his memory. "Ask Okafor. Ask anyone if they know the house of the Ugo family," Daniel urged, his head throbbing with pain and anxiety. After a few desperate inquiries, they finally located the modest, weather-beaten family compound, a stark contrast to the sterile opulence of his mansion. As the gleaming Mercedes-Benz pulled to a stop in the dusty yard, the sight of the vehicle alone brought the small household rushing out. An elderly woman, Mama Ugo, shielding her eyes from the sun, peered out. Next to her stood a weathered man, Papa Ugo. And then there was Bizi, the sister he hadn't recognized, clutching the hand of a thin, pale boy, her son, Kalu. A collective gasp swept through the family. "Daniel?" Mama Ugo whispered, her hands flying to her mouth. "Is that truly our lost son?" "My son, where have you been all these years? We thought you were gone forever," Papa Ugo exclaimed, tears welling up in his eyes. "And this car? Who owns this grand vehicle?" Daniel barely registered their presence. He stumbled out of the car, his white linen still stained and disheveled, ignoring the questions, the joy, and the pain radiating from his family. His eyes were fixed solely on Beezy. "Beezy, the money. Where is the money you collected on Friday?" Daniel demanded, his voice manic and desperate. Beezy recoiled, looking confused and frightened. "Daniel, what are you talking about? What money?" "The envelope. The one you took from my house on Evergreen Lane." Daniel shrieked. "You were there. Don't lie to me." He grabbed her arm, his grip hard. "Tell me where it is." It was Beezy's turn to feel rage. "That big house, that was you? You have been living in a mansion, a billionaire, and you never came back. You let us struggle while you threw money at strangers. You didn't even recognize your own sister." She held up the thin, empty envelope. "I told the lady I needed money for my son's medicine. And you want it back? Are you so rich that you must chase down a meager offering to the sister you abandoned? I don't care about the abandonment. The covenant. It was broken." Daniel roared, completely unhinged. "You cannot spend that money. It is poisoned. It is my life. Give it back now." Beezy stepped back, pulling Kalu, her son, close. Her voice was firm, laced with disgust. "I used it, Daniel. I paid the bills. It is gone. Kalu will live because of that money. You can't have it back." The world seemed to tilt. "Gone." Daniel whispered, the word hollow. His knees buckled, and he collapsed onto the dusty ground. He had failed. The 3-day clock was ticking, and with the money spent, the contamination was complete. Papa Ugo stepped forward, shielding Beezy and the boy. He looked at his son, the desperate, money-crazed stranger, with profound sorrow. "Your life has made you a monster, Daniel. Leave us. We don't want your cursed money." Ignoring their judgment, Daniel scrambled back into the car. 1 day left. He pounded the dashboard, ordering Okafor to drive, not back to the mansion, but straight back to the herbalist. "Baba Jide. We must go back to Baba Jide. There must be another way. I need a solution. There must be a second chance." Daniel screamed into the wind, the reality of his looming madness pressing in on him. The Mercedes-Benz careened back towards the city, retracing the long, agonizing miles. Daniel Ugo was beyond panic. He was in a state of sheer terror, a trapped animal sensing the approaching snare. The thought of losing his sanity, of becoming a babbling outcast, stripped of the power his wealth provided, was worse than any physical pain. His family's disgust was a fresh wound, but the fear of the four spirits and the impending madness was all that mattered now. "Faster, Okafor! Do you hear me? Faster!" Daniel roared from the back seat, his voice cracking. Okafor, pushing the luxury car to its limit on the poor road, muttered a prayer under his breath. "We are almost there, sir." They arrived back at Baba Jide's compound in the dead of night, the silence broken only by the chirping of crickets and the frantic pounding of Daniel's heart. He practically threw himself out of the car, stumbling past the strange, moonlit totems. He found Baba Jide in his dimly lit sanctuary, tending to a small, smoky fire. The herbalist looked up, his expression already one of grim finality. "Baba, I saw her. I saw Beezy. The money is gone. She spent it on her son's health." Daniel choked out, falling to his knees before the elderly man. "She used the money to pay for her son's medical bills. Please, Baba, you are the only one who can save me. There must be a second way to satisfy the oracle." Baba Jide threw a handful of dry leaves onto the fire. A sharp, bitter smoke rose, stinging Daniel's eyes. "Silence, Daniel Ugo," the herbalist's voice thundered, vibrating with otherworldly power. "The terms of the contract are absolute. The money has entered the stream of your family's fortune. It has paid the debt of a life. There is no reversal. Daniel gripped the herbalist's robes. No, I will give them more. I will give them 10 times the amount. I will give them the mansion. Just tell me how to stop the madness. Baba Jide pushed him away forcefully. Your money is no longer the solution. The covenant is built on a terrible separation. You chose wealth over blood. The payment for breaking that vow is the destruction of your mind and your spirit. The spirits are already preparing the chamber for your reception. You will run mad by daybreak. That is the only solution left for this contract. Daniel stared, his mouth open, utter despair washing over him. Madness? My mind gone? No, Baba, please. After all these years, all this sacrifice, you let this happen over a mistake. Baba Jide's eyes flashed with anger. You call it a mistake? You turned your back on your own flesh and blood for 10 years, trusting only in the evil of the contract. Now you beg me to interfere with powers I barely control. Get out of my sight, Daniel. Go. Leave now, or I will use the remaining hours to place a countercurse that will ensure you never find peace, even in your madness. The final threat was enough. Daniel scrambled back out of the compound, heart pounding against his ribs, knowing the man who held the key to his survival had just shut the door forever. The Mercedes-Benz pulled away from the herbalist's place, the silence inside the car now heavy with unspoken terror. Okafor dared not speak. Daniel looked at his watch. It was past 1 a.m. Monday had begun, and the curse was scheduled to manifest by daybreak. A few hours left. He leaned back in the plush leather seat, the stark contrast between his surroundings and his inevitable fate a cruel irony. He had lived like a king and was about to die like a pauper, losing the one thing he had always valued, control. Okafor, Daniel whispered, his voice dangerously soft. Drive. Just drive. Take me to the highest point in the city. The place where you can see all the lights. As the car sped through the empty city streets, Daniel looked out at the glittering lights of the metropolis he had conquered. He had bought, controlled, and manipulated everything he saw, all based on a terrifying transaction. And now, as the clock ticked down to the final minute of his sanity, he was left with nothing but the echo of his sister's desperate refusal and the haunting images of the four spirits. The madness was coming, and he had no coffin, no money, and no ritual left to stop it. He was completely alone. The black Mercedes-Benz climbed the winding road to the city's highest point, a quiet, forgotten crest overlooking the sprawling metropolis. Below, millions of lights glittered, a tapestry of ambition, struggle, and dreams that Daniel Ugo had once commanded with nothing more than a bank transfer. Okafor killed the engine. The silence was immense, broken only by the frantic rush of Daniel's own breathing. Daniel stepped out, leaving the luxury of the car for the cold, windswept concrete. He walked to the edge, looking down at the world that would soon forget him. He was still wearing the tatters of his white linen, his skin bruised and aching, his escape from Baba Jide a fresh trauma. The hours were melting away, and with them, his mind. Look at it, Okafor, Daniel murmured, his voice flat, devoid of the earlier panic. All that fire, all that light. And for what? For a brief, intoxicating period of command. He looked at his hands, which had signed millions away, yet couldn't save his own sanity. I broke the primary law. Wealth over blood. I chose the gold that rots the soul over the life that gives it meaning. Was it worth it? He turned the question over in the silence, a profound philosophical reflection in the face of ruin. The power was everything. The power to say yes to any demand. The power to feel like a god, even if only for a few hours a week. Then, a sudden, sharp, discordant laugh tore from his throat. It wasn't the cynical, club-side chuckle of the billionaire. It was the wild, unpredictable sound of a mind fracturing. A god! Daniel shrieked, throwing his head back and laughing up at the starless sky. A miserable, frightened steward to a coffin. And all it took was one little envelope, one little slip of paper, to bring the whole kingdom down. Okafor watched, paralyzed with fear as his boss began to stride back and forth, gesturing wildly at the empty air. They will collect the final payment, Okafor. They won't get the money, but they will take the mind that tried to control it. Daniel yelled. He pointed a trembling finger at Okafor. Did you see the fear? Did you see Beezy's eyes? Disgust, Okafor. That's all I earned. Disgust. Okafor slowly approached him, his voice thick with pleading. Sir, please. Let's go back to the house. We can call a doctor. Please, let me hold you. As Okafor reached out, Daniel's eyes, now completely vacant and wild, fixed on the driver. The madness, raw and explosive, took hold. Daniel burst into a frightening, erratic sprint, tearing away from the car and the last chance of help. You can't hold me. The debt is due. The price must be paid. Daniel screamed, running down the steep, dark road, his ragged white clothing flapping around him like broken wings. It didn't take long for the inevitable to happen. By the next afternoon, Tuesday, the story of Daniel Ugo's descent had spread like wildfire. He was found in the bustling Oshodi Market Square, far from the secluded opulence of his home. He was a tragic, horrifying spectacle. His hair was matted with grime, his handsome face contorted into a constant, twitching grimace. He was stripped down to his tattered undergarments, his former elegance replaced by the frantic, unpredictable gestures of the truly unwell. He was yelling unintelligible incantations, occasionally stopping to pick up refuse and examine it with intense scrutiny, then laughing hysterically before throwing it away. A vast crowd had gathered. They pointed, whispered, and clicked their phones. I knew it. That money wasn't clean, exclaimed a market woman named Emeka. The spirits he was serving have come to collect. I knew a person doesn't share millions every Friday for nothing. Look at his hands. The hands that sprayed 1,000 naira notes are now scratching in the dirt, another man added, shaking his head. The legend of Daniel Ugo, the mysterious, benevolent billionaire, was replaced overnight by the cautionary tale of the madman, the symbol of the devastating price of forbidden wealth. The covenant was fulfilled, the fortune remained, but the mind that controlled it was gone. Moral to be learned: the story of Daniel Ugo is a brutal reminder that true wealth comes with a cost, and shortcuts to success often lead to irreversible loss. When you violate your own moral or familial boundaries for gain, the thing you sacrifice, your integrity, your sanity, or your connections, will always be the final price. What do you think about the life of Daniel Ugo? Do you think he could have done better? Let me know in the comments below. And if this shocking twist left you wanting more, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more unforgettable stories.